whenever you're ready.
Okay, and we are on the.
Yes.
Okay. Hello, good afternoon. Let's call this meeting to order. This is KIPTA, Transportation Technical Coordination Committee meeting. Today is Wednesday, April 12th. Welcome everyone and good to see you in person and virtually. Andy, would you please do the roll call?
Yes, ma'am. So thank you all for joining us. It looks like we've got a robust attendance online. So let's try this virtual roll call. We only got a few folks in the room. So who do we have from Bullitt County?
I'm here too, Judge Summers and Keith Griffey.
Thank you all for joining us. So we got a double dose. City of Charlestown.
Toby.
Hi, Toby. City of J-Town. Matt Lunier, our chairman, he was out of town at a training conference or something this week. So he'll miss us this month. City of Jeffersonville. Mount Washington. I thought I saw the mayor on here. Hi, Mayor. I see you. New Albany. See you back in New Albany. How about Shepherdsville? St. Matthews.
Keenan Stratman.
Hey, Keenan, how you doing?
Doing well.
Good. Clark County? Brian somewhere. See his name. Saw his face earlier. Hi, Brian. We see your name anyways.
There it is.
There he is. All right. Let's see who else. Floyd County? Nick here?
Yeah, Nick Creevy's here.
Hey, Nick. Usually anybody from IDEM? Usually. How about NDOT? I saw Taylor.
I'm here.
Hi, Taylor. Thanks for joining us. Jefferson Riverport.
Hello,
Kentucky D. Oh, who did I hear?
Miguel.
Hey, Miguel, how are you doing?
Fine, thanks. How are you, Andy?
Doing well. Kentucky DAQ, Division of Air Quality. How about KYTC? We have a couple.
Tracy Lovell, District 5.
Hey, Tracy. Tracy and Tom, thank you all for joining us. Let's see, anybody from Office of Transportation Delivery at KYTC? I don't think there is. Louisville Metro APCD, I bet we have a few today.
Hey, yeah, this is Michelle, and we have Director Rachel Hamilton, we have Byron Gary, and there's Craig Butler. Yep.
All right, wow, thank you all for joining us. We have them listed as Metro Economic Development, but what are we now? Louisville Forward, Mike?
Yes, please. And I'm here.
Hey, Mike.
Oh, you have to do it yourself.
Anybody else in Louisville Metro? Any of the various offices? All right.
Say Beth Stuber, Planning and Design.
Hi, Beth.
Amanda Dethridge, Public Works.
Hi, Amanda. All right, thank you all for joining us. Airport Authority. Louisville Riverport Authority, we got Miguel. Oldham County.
Jim Silliman here.
Hi, Jim.
Good morning or afternoon.
Yeah. Port of Indiana. Park Accessibility Advisory Council.
This is Allie. I'm here.
Hi, Allie. Thank you for joining us today. Town of Clarksville.
Mike Huff is here.
Hey, Mike. And Tark.
Ida Colby.
Hi, Ida. And it looks like we have some advisory members here too. I think let the record state that we have Larry Summers from New Albany in attendance. This is tremendous attendance online. That's the most we probably ever had online. As far as our advisory members go, I think do we have some FHWA folks or a folk in a person in attendance. Did I see you, Tanya? There you are.
Hello, everybody.
Thank you all. Thank you for joining us. Any other advisory members? Thank you all for joining us today. It's a full house, maybe not in the Kip the Burke room, but it certainly is on the Zoom call. This is wild. Look at so many people on there. But with that, I'll turn it back to Aida, and we definitely most certainly have a quorum.
Thank you, Andy. The next item on the agenda is March 2023 PTCC meeting minutes, review and approval. And I do hope that you had an opportunity to review. Do you have any comments, questions, or any revisions if needed? The action is requested, obviously. Any comments? Hearing done. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes? Thank you. Second, anyone?
I'll second. Jim
Thank you.
Sullivan.
All in favor, please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? I guess I should ask first any discussion, but we passed that stage, right?
I think so. I agree. I think it's unanimous.
No opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Item number 3, Transportation Policy Committee Report. KIPTA staff will review the activities of the March 2023 TPC meeting, and Andy will present.
Thank you, ma'am. So this is an interesting one because as many of you all might recall, our March meeting was a joint meeting. So the TTCC met with the TPC in late March, on March 23rd, that is. And so the primary reason for that, as a reminder, was because that was when we brought before both committees our update to our long-range plan, connecting Kentuckiana 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, and our new transportation improvement program. So that was approved by the TPC and the TTCC that day. Those documents are out in their 30-day public review period as we speak right now. More on that in a minute. Also at that meeting, we had tremendous attendance that day too. So we got a good run going right now. One of the reasons for that was because we had Mr. Derek James and a colleague of his from Amtrak, and they came and spoke to the committee, and then they stuck around and spoke to the KIPTA board of directors immediately thereafter too. So the board and the TPC and the TTCC, I think it seems like everybody was very interested in that. Just an update on that for those that don't know, KIPTA in partnership with Louisville Metro and with the support of many other agencies in this region and beyond, has submitted a what's known as a corridor identification and development grant through the FRA. And that's going to assess, our grant would assess the viability of passenger rail returning from Louisville to Indianapolis. And our friends at INDOT have applied for the same grant program to cover the Indianapolis to Chicago portion. So with the idea, of course, being a Louisville to Chicago reconnection of passenger rail service in the future. So right now we're in a waiting game on that one. So we'll wait and see probably this summer. Also at that meeting, for those that weren't there, I brought the work program, more on that at TPC this month. And that's about it. There's a couple other updates, but odds and ends that we clarified then, but it was a tremendously attended meeting, the joint meeting. So thank you all for your support. Thanks for your patience for joining the TPC that day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 4, public comment period. We will facilitate review of comments submitted prior to the TTCC meeting and entertain your comments offered as part of agenda number 4, and Greg is presenting.
Yes, we did not receive any comments prior to the meeting. We'll check one more time just to be on the safe side. I'm not seeing anything up there. And I don't see anything in the Q&A. So that concludes item number 4.
Thank you, Greg. Item number 5, Air Pollution Control District Director Rachel Hamilton will provide an update on the recently adopted Kentucky House Joint Resolution calling for the removal of the reformulated gas requirement in Jefferson County and parts of Oldham and Bullitt County. Andy is presenting.
Yes, so I would like to introduce Ms. Rachel Hamilton. She's the director of Louisville Metro Air Pollution Control District. They've been a long time partner of KIPTA in many ways and many fronts. And so, and evidence of that is their participation in the TTCC. It's probably no agency has more people at a TTCC meeting other than KIPTA staff perhaps than APCD does. So we're proud to have Ms. Rachel Hamilton here to speak a little bit today. And Rachel, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much for that. And thank you for that introduction. We're grateful to have you all in partnership because our air quality is everyone's responsibility, and transportation related air pollution, of course, is one that we don't directly regulate. So starting out with that, I do want to acknowledge my colleagues on this call, Michelle King, APCD's Director of Program Planning and Executive Administrator, Craig Butler, Environmental Coordinator, who does our mobile source modeling, and of course, Byron Gary, our regulatory coordinator, at least for the next week. Byron will be leaving us to take a position with the Kentucky Resources Council, and we've been grateful for his expertise and work in developing our state implementation plan. So with that, I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Can everyone see that?
Yes, ma'am.
Outstanding. All right, let me get my slideshow launched. So I am here today to provide an update on reformulated gasoline. In order to do that, it helps to put it into its proper context. So we're going to talk about what is ozone, the Louisville area's current air quality status, RFG use here, some recent legislative actions by the Kentucky General Assembly, and our next steps. And I do want to mention that as I go along, my colleagues should feel free to jump in and add extra support where they feel it's needed. And if you will hold your questions, we'll answer those at the end unless it's really burning. So starting off, what is ozone? Ozone is not a directly emitted pollutant. Instead, it's formed when other pollutants, nitrogen oxides, which come from the combustion of fuels, and volatile organic compounds, which come from a variety of sources, including biogenic sources, trees, manufacturing facilities, consumer use products, and of course, vehicles, mix in the presence of sunlight and form a third pollutant, ozone. We're concerned about ozone because it can aggravate lung disease, can cause shortness of breath, inflame airways, and of course, increase the frequency of asthma attacks. And here in Louisville, our ozone season begins March 1st, and it extends through October 31st. I am somewhat dismayed that tomorrow is April the 13th, and we have issued our first air quality alert of the year. That equation that I just mentioned before, nitrogen oxides plus volatile organic compounds in the presence of sunlight, is very simplified. Ozone formation is one of the most complex chemical things that we deal with around here at APCD. It is in fact a series of nonlinear reactions that happen in the atmosphere. And while we can look at the sources of those precursor emissions, nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds, and understand those from the sources that we regulate, when you combine that with geography, the fact that Louisville sits inside of a bowl geographically, and the weather, and in particular, when the weather is hot, we have stagnant air masses, and the humidity is low, we see high ozone formation area here in our area. For those of you who think in August that when the weather is all hot and sticky, that it's oppressive and the air quality must be bad, believe it or not, that high humidity actually has an air quality benefit. In this equation, it actually scrubs out the ozone formation. So I'm a big fan of hot, sweaty, humid days. Here in Louisville, when we look at those sources of those precursor emissions of volatile organic compounds and nitrogen oxides, we look at them from a variety of categories. Those point sources, of course, are stationary sources like LG&E, large sources of both nitrogen oxide and volatile organic compound emissions. Those non-point sources, though, are a little bit different. Those are really small stationary sources that on their own, they're not really big sources. But when we look at them collectively, they can have a big impact. Some of that is from consumer use, but it's also from things like dry cleaners and gas stations, personal residential heating and fuel use, and institutional and commercial heating. So you'll see there that non-point source sector, particularly with those volatile organic compounds, that's pretty high. It is also one of the reasons why in California, they have pretty stringent requirements on their consumer product use. Non-road are things like planes, trains, boats, lawnmowers, off-road vehicles, construction equipment. And of course, you all are very familiar with that on-road portion. Given that, what we find here in Louisville is that we've all done a pretty good job. This is our current national ambient air quality status. These 6 pollutants that are listed here are the criteria pollutants. In 1970, when the Congress told EPA they were going to have to regulate pollutants, this is what they chose because they were ubiquitous and they have public health impacts. Today, I'm very happy to report that the Louisville area is actually meeting all 6 of the criteria pollutants. I'm going to leave ozone alone for just a second and mention that with respect to particulate matter, US EPA has recently proposed strengthening the 12 microgram per cubic meter standard. Their initial proposal is to reduce that standard between 10 to 9 micrograms per cubic meter, but they took comment on as low as 8 and as high as 11. The public comment period for that proposal ended at the end of March. It will take EPA some time to respond to all of the comments that they've received. And then at some point, we'll see a newly strengthened particulate matter standard proposed. And at that time, we'll evaluate whether or not our area is in attainment or in non-attainment. And if so, we will work to continue to reduce particulate matter pollution using that state implementation plan process as our guide. And I have to note here, and this is kind of geeky, and I apologize. What you see here with these national ambient air quality standards is really a brilliant continuous improvement plan. Congress told EPA, you guys are going to set the standard. State and local programs like APCD are going to make the plan to reach that standard. And then every 5 years or so, you're going to go back and look at that public health-based information to be sure that that standard remains protective of human health and the environment. And so over time, we really have managed to improve air quality substantially. And your all's help has been invaluable. This is where we are with respect to ozone. You'll see here that we don't have a nice straight glide path towards attainment. Each of these colored blocks is when EPA has strengthened that standard over time. You see the 97 standard in blue, that 2008 standard in green, the 2015 standard in standard in orange. Where we have these peaks and valleys, a lot of that is really driven by the weather. For those of us who were around, we can remember back in 2018 when it was a long, hot and dry summer, very similar to what we saw in 2012 and 2013. Currently, our area is meeting the National Ambient Air Quality Standard for the 2015 ozone standard of 70 parts per million. We are right there. In September of last year, we submitted a request to US EPA to redesignate our area to attainment. Currently, EPA is evaluating that proposal, but it is our understanding that we should see a proposal to redesignate the area shortly. Given how close we are to that standard, we really encourage everyone to stay up to date on air quality information. And you can do that through a variety of means. If you are interested, you can sign up to receive information from APCD through social media. But you can always check on a daily basis Louisville Air Watch through the link above, and you can find real-time air quality data from our monitors throughout Kentuckiana. In addition, we do provide a monthly summary to our board. And there not only can you see where we are in terms of trend lines and other views, but we also calculate our design value, which shows our ability to meet that national ambient air quality standard on a rolling basis. So you can really keep up to date with what's happening with respect to air quality. So this really comes to the meat of our conversation today, and that is around reformulated gas. So reformulated gasoline is a blend that is intended to burn more cleanly than conventional gasoline. And at its time, it was really it was exceptionally good at reducing smog forming and toxic pollutants. It was mandated by Congress to be developed as part of the 1990 Clean Air Act amendments. It is required in certain areas across the country, particularly in the West, California and some of the other Western states. But it provided for areas to be opted in. And as a result, in 1991, the governor of Kentucky 1995, Governor Bretton Jones opted portions of Jefferson and Bullitt counties into RFG. So with that opting in, our area was restricted from selling conventional gas and required to sell RFG year-round. And in addition to reducing those precursors of ozone during ozone season, volatile organic compounds and nitrogen oxides, the use here locally was also very effective at reducing air toxic exposures, particularly to benzene. So we got a lot of benefit out of the use of RFG. One of the things that we often hear, and some of the concerns that we hear expressed, is around the cost of RFG. And we've reached out to the folks at US EPA's Office of Transportation and Air Quality to talk about that cost. And they estimate that it's somewhere around 5 to 7 cents per gallon to manufacture reformulated gas. And that's the cost above what conventional gas would be. But then there are, of course, transportation-related costs. I do want to note, again, we use it year-round here in Kentucky, that according to AAA, today's average gas price in Kentucky is $3.41. The average gas price today in Louisville, where we use RFG year-round, is $3.42. In Lexington, where they use conventional gas, today's average is $3.45. In Covington, where they use conventional gas, the cost today average is $3.65. And in Ashland, where they use conventional gas and candidly make conventional gas, the average today is $3.58. So there's a whole lot of things that go into the pricing related to reformulated gas. And in fact, if anyone is interested, there's a really nice 2016 report that the Legislative Research Commission did for the Kentucky General Assembly that's available. Let me know in the chat and I'll be happy to send a copy your way. Here's a map of where we use reformulated gas in Jefferson County and those portions of Bullitt and Oldham County. And as you see, they track along those transportation corridors. Where we are now, though, as I have mentioned, at the time we were initially using reformulated gas, we saw a really significant emissions reduction. And that's over the sale and use of conventional gas. But since that time, both due to new EPA regulations of conventional gasoline, we're at Tier 3 now, and also improvement in vehicle emissions, the benefit of RFG has been reduced significantly. So at this point in time, what we know, what we're showing here, is that due to local, state, and federal controls, the emissions of volatile organic compounds and nitrogen oxide emissions are going to continue to drop over time. And we've really seen a narrowing of the benefit of RFG over conventional gas. And because of these changes, the area now meets not only the 1979 ozone NAAQS, but also the 1997 strengthened standard, the 2008 strengthened standard, and the strengthened 2015 ozone national ambient air quality standard. With that in mind, and with an ever-increasing cost of gasoline and concerns over supplies, in 2020, the Kentucky General Assembly passed House Joint Resolution 8. And that resolution required the district and the cabinet, who has responsibilities in Bullitt and Oldham counties, to analyze the health and environmental benefits of reformulated gas and its cost. and for us to draft a revision to our state implementation plan to remove reformulated gas if there were other available offset emissions to make up for the difference that we were getting from RFG. One real key to this whole requirement here is that reference to Clean Air Act Section 110L. Under 110L, EPA can't approve a request to remove a control strategy if it would prevent us from attaining a standard. Since our area was in non-attainment, this is a very high bar. We would need to find offsetting emissions that are quantifiable, surplus, permanent, and enforcement. And those are really key terms. Unfortunately, those aren't easy to find these days. There's not a whole lot of low-hanging fruit left compared to some of our previous opportunities to remove or to exchange control strategies. And in particular, a surplus emission is one that's not required to be made as a part of the Clean Air Act. So while we have a lot of emission reductions that are compelled by federal legislation, we can't count those. Those are already accounted for and we can't double dip. They're not surplus. And again, they have to be permanent. It has to be more than a company saying, we're not going to make that product for the next couple of years. It has to be that company saying, we're never going to make that product ever again, and we're going to take out all the equipment associated with that product line. And again, those emissions have to be real, quantifiable, surplus, permanent, and enforceable. In 2020, after looking, we were unable to identify any emissions that would offset the benefit that we received from RFG during our non-attainment designation. Fast forward to where we are now. And in 2023, in House Joint Resolution 37, the General Assembly called on US EPA to expeditiously review and approve the pending request to redesignate the Louisville area to attainment for ozone. We submitted that back in September. We appreciate the General Assembly calling EPA to do this quickly. I believe they've heard that message and they're working on preparing a proposal to redesignate the area to attainment. They've then directed the cabinet and the district to propose revisions to our state implementation plan to remove reformulated gas, and if needed, to find some offsetting air pollution control strategies in order to be sure that our area doesn't slip into non-attainment. And then finally, they've asked us, the cabinet and ABCD, to come forward and talk to the Interim Joint Committee on Natural Resources and Energy by October 31st to provide an update. So that brings us to our next steps. Really here, step number one is the threshold. EPA proposes and approves the area to attainment. And that is the real key here. Once that happens, we recognize that our next step is to prepare and propose a revision to our state implementation plan that satisfies Section 110L of the Clean Air Act, which we believe we'll be able to do, in part due to continued reductions in mobile source emissions from improved mileage standards and reductions in nitrogen oxide emissions from the closure of coal-fired electric generating units in Louisville and also in areas upwind of us. EPA has estimated that about 30% of the nitrogen oxides that we deal with here in Louisville actually come from outside of our jurisdictional boundary. In the meantime, the district recognizes that this means that we will need to work with our partners at KIPTA, the Kentucky DAQ, and Indiana Department of Environmental Management to ensure that the area's motor vehicle emissions budgets remain sufficient. So, this is the current state of where we're at. We understand that this will mean work for many of us. But again, we do believe that we will be able to make a sufficient showing to US EPA to remove RFG. That's our obligation. APCD is required to put together that state implementation plan package, but the ultimate decision will rest with US EPA. So with that, I will open it up for questions.
Thank you very much, Rachel. This was really great presentation and very informative for all of us, and especially emphasis on how important is the air we breathe. So thank you. And with that, I would open the floor for discussion and any questions that the members have for you.
I've got a question if nobody else does. Am I wrong, Rachel, in that our Southern Indiana communities sell a different blend, but yet somehow enhanced, not called reformulated gasoline, like reduced vapor pressure or something like that? Is that correct?
They have a requirement to use what's called Reid vapor pressure gas, or RVP, which again, if you're looking at conventional gas, that would be the base. Reid vapor pressure is another air pollution control improvement to gasoline. And then RFG is a little bit more stringent in its reduction ability. So, but yes, they are required to use RVP at a minimum. They can use RFG to satisfy the RVP minimum.
Okay. Another question, do we know when we expect to hear from EPA? Or is that just as good, anybody's guess as good as anybody else's?
I'd really like to put a date on it, but I'm not. EPA had said that they were going to be releasing that proposed PM standard imminently, and that took 1.5 years. So I believe we'll see it sometime this spring.
Okay.
Any other questions? Anyone, comments? Well, thank you, Rachel. We appreciate you being here with us today, and we hope to hear from you again soon, especially when these regulatory determinations are finalized and we have more work to do, I guess.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much for your work.
Thank you. So we are at item number 6 on the agenda, which is urbanized area update, and staff will discuss the latest information surrounding the new urbanized areas after the census 2020 data. And Chris Nicholas will be presenting. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. Oh. Let me solve it too. Hopefully a slideshow will pop up momentarily.
It will take time.
Let's keep the Wi-Fi for you.
So this is going to be another census urbanized area update. This is the third one that I've done. It's been a while. It's been since I think February when I made the last presentation.
Is it out there in that folder?
I put it in your folder there.
We'll do that. We'll do this part that way at least.
Okay.
We are still working on it, coming up.
Yeah, it's coming. Maybe let's stop sharing.
Sorry for the technical difficulties. Greg's gonna pull it up. Okay,
There we go.
Thank you.
all right. We can go to the next one. Okay, so like I said, it's been, I think, since the February TTCC meeting. So I'm gonna do a quick little recap for you all. One of the things we talked about is that the US Census Bureau makes the urban area boundary updates every 10 years. And as you may remember, the adjustments between 2010 and 2020 criteria contributed to significant changes within the KIPTA MPO area. The total land area in 2020 decreased by about 76 square miles as compared to 2010. And two significant changes were that Mount Washington and LaGrange are now separate UZAs. The previous presentations included urbanized area boundary data, which was released by the census on December 29th of 2022, and geographic data released from the Census Bureau on January 6th of this year. And then also FHWA released some of that data on January 18th, 2022. You've all, whoever saw those previous presentations has seen these maps, but as a refresher, this kind of shows the changes between the year 2000 and 2020. In 2000, was a little bit different than 2010. 2010, you can see there was significantly more land than where we are now in 2020 with what the census adjusted the boundaries to. Next slide, please. And this is the overview of the Louisville, Jefferson County, Kentucky, Indiana urbanized area and our gains and losses. So the red colored areas, those represent what was lost to us, and that does include Mount Washington and LaGrange there. And then the green is brand new territory to our region for 2020.
Also, part of the red area was all or any of the 2010 urbanized area boundary that would have been in Harrison County, Indiana, and Shelby County, Kentucky. So it's
right.
red, it's out.
Okay, so I got some key considerations for the next steps. The UZA adjustments are not required, but they're possible through collaboration with the Federal Highway Administration, state transportation agencies, and local and regional governments. Just so you all know, it is possible if we wanted, which we don't, to do nothing, and then we would just keep what the census wanted for the boundaries. That's an option, but we can make these adjustments. The UAB adjustments are not allowed. However, what the census made the boundaries, that is going to stand. The financial determination by the UAB shape and size is not going to change with the adjusted urbanized boundary or any adjustments that we come to decide to make. December 29th, 2023. Yeah, okay. Sorry, 3 years after the census release, the adjustments to the urban boundaries should be approved by the state transportation agencies and the FHWA division office. So that'll be later this year. FHWA order MI 100.I1 delegates the authority to approve adjusted urban area boundaries from the Secretary of Transportation to the FHWA division administrators. FHWA will consider all urban area boundaries final as of April 15th, 2025, and they will use the original 2020 census boundaries for all urban areas that have not been adjusted. And then I also added this in case I think it would be relevant to some people in the room. December 29th, 2025, 5 years after the census release, the changes to the highway functional classification associated with the census defined urban area boundaries should be approved by the state transportation agency and FHWA. Also, I want to point out that what we're talking about when we say adjusted areas, that's the smooth boundary. And So anytime we refer to the smooth boundary, that's what we're talking about, the adjusted boundary. If we're talking about the jagged boundary, that's the original boundary that the Census Bureau gave designation to. Okay, so why is this important for transportation planning? And these are taken off of the FHWA website. Designation of the MPOs and TMAs are sorry about that. And the application of the Metropolitan Transportation Planning requirements for MPOs and TMAs. Distribution of Metropolitan Planning Program funding from state departments of transportation to MPOs. Allocation of the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program funding to urban and rural areas, assigning the functional classifications to roadways and reporting data on the extent, condition, performance, use, and operating characteristics of our nation's highways through the Highway Performance Monitoring System. Designation of critical rural and urban freight corridors for the National Highway Freight Program. And then there's the applicability of MPO performance plans, traffic congestion, on-road mobile source emissions, performance measures for the congestion mitigation and air quality improvement program. And application of transportation conformity requirements for air quality, non-attainment and maintenance areas. And then application of outdoor advertising control requirements for urban areas.
That third bullet point there, that's the big dog. That's the big one that matters most, right? How much funding will be allocated to this region, to the TPC, based on the population of the jagged boundary, to be clear, but of the census boundaries nonetheless.
Okay. So also it's important to note that there's some variations on defining the term urban. The Census Bureau defines urban as a statistical geographic entity consisting of densely settled core created from census blocks and contiguous qualifying territory that together have at least 2,000 housing units or 5,000 people. The FHWA definition is a little bit different. Urban area means an urbanized area, or in the case of an urbanized area encompassing more than one state, that part of the urbanized area in such state or urban place as designated by the Census Bureau having a population of 5,000 people or more, and not within any urbanized area, within boundaries to be fixed by responsible state and local officials in cooperation with each other, subject to approval by the Secretary. Such boundaries shall encompass at a minimum the entire urban place designated by the Census Bureau, except in the case of cities in the state of Maine and state of New Hampshire. Rural, it's pretty straightforward. Census territory not defined as urban, and FHWA, the term rural areas means all states, all areas of the state not included in the urban areas. So then I also included the census definition of urbanized area is a retired statistical geographic entity type consisting of a densely settled core created from census tracts or blocks and adjacent densely settled territory that together have a minimum population of 50,000 people. Urbanized areas were not included for the 2020 census. The FHWA, the term urbanized area means an area with a population of 50,000 or more, designated by census bureaus within boundaries to be fixed by the state and local officials in cooperation with the Secretary. And again, such boundaries at a minimum have to include the entire urbanized area within the state designated by the Census Bureau. So it looks like the FHWA is keeping this, but the census needs some changes.
They did, they had some, well, I can't remember what they call them, small urbanized areas where the 5 to 50,000 threshold. Now they're all the same thing. So Mount Washington is the same as Louisville. It's not called the small, or Charlestown, for example. Charlestown is one, was one. Charlestown, small urban area, or whatever the name used to be, it's now urban area, just like the big giant yellow one she showed, the Louisville.
That's right. Okay, so really, as far as I can find, or any of us can find so far, The only real guideline is that the adjusted boundary must include the original urban boundary as defined by the census in its entirety. The adjusted boundary should expand, not contract, the original boundary. And I have a very rough demonstration that I'll show you all. So we took our shot at
Not gonna work,
oh no.
because I don't have our GIS.
Oh,
Well, when we were gonna share on Chris's computer, this is gonna work just fine. We'll try to share your screen one more time real quick if it doesn't work.
yeah, okay, folks, I'm gonna try to see if it'll let me share now. Because, so
We can get you hardwired. You come that other way, maybe.
if it will work, what I'd like to show is a rough map where myself and I had a lot of help from Joseph in GIS, where we were putting together a map that included relevant layers. And we took the original census boundary and oh,
All right, we might not have visuals.
I'm so sorry. Well, I had a really cool map to show you
Yeah,
all.
I saw it earlier. It's cool.
That was the finale of my presentation after all that talking. So there's one more slide out there. So let me talk a little bit about the map before I close out. So we have a map where we included layers to kind of guide our thought process of where should the boundaries be adjusted to. Some layers that we have, I don't have 2010, but I have the year 2000 adjusted boundary. And so one question to consider is, well, should we go out to where it was in 2000, or should we stay closer to what the census gave us for 2020? And we have what the census gave for 2010, which as you all remember from the beginning of the presentation, is a lot farther out than what we got in 2020 now. So these are questions that we have, and I think other things to consider in making the boundary is we have a layer of the TARP routes, for example. We have a layer of parks. You want to consider areas that people are traveling to that maybe are just outside of the boundary. And again, the main guideline is to keep all of what the census gave and expand out. So some questions that we need to resolve for what's next is, are there going to be any additional guidelines announced in making these adjustments? And also, what effect are the new UZAs going to have on the Louisville area? And
So some of those questions we may have answers to is a little bit as soon as tomorrow. There's a statewide transportation planners meeting in Frankfurt. So we're not the only region who area contracted. And for that matter, we're not the only region that has new satellite urbanized areas, whatever you want to call them, Mount Washington and Chepton and LaGrange. Evansville lost Henderson, Kentucky, and the Cincinnati region lost any area in Indiana. So there's some unanswered questions on how those MPOs are going to receive funding, if at all, for those areas. The answer probably remains probably not, right?
Yeah.
Because that going by the 2010 rule book, the answer would be no. And so whether or not we're still funded for the populations of Mount Washington and LaGrange We never were for Charlestown, right? And so what that means for those communities in terms of, are we expected to even smooth the boundary for Mount Washington and LaGrange? We never were for Charlestown. So probably not is the answer to that too. So there's some unanswered questions, quite frankly.
Thanks, Sandy. So some next steps, we are gonna be looking to make some meetings with local partners, the county officials, and discuss our ideas for where to adjust the boundary and.
That's right. So what we're envisioning is probably one meeting in each county, in the next month or so, where we'll come and the visual will promise it will work at that spot, at that location, even though it doesn't work at Kipta, but I promise it'll work there, where we will at least present the first draft. And in Jefferson County, for example, to use a simple example, if that jagged boundary was just inside Gene Snyder and it really makes sense to take that one extra census block out to the Gene Snyder's freeway, for example, to extend that boundary, then that's what we would work with the various jurisdictions in Jefferson County, rural metro, top of that list, to do. One meeting in each county, come down to Bullock County, out in Clark County, out in Floyd and Oldham as well, to say, hey, here's what we were thinking. Here's the map that Chris could have shown, would have shown.
Next time.
Yes,
Yeah.
next time. Yeah.
Chris, thank you very much. This is really important work. And while we sometimes think those changes are small, if they do have impact on actual work of each county and also funding. And thank you, Andy, for clarification. Do you committee members have any comments or questions for Chris or Andy? Okay, hearing done, I'm sure we'll have more opportunities to hear about the process.
Yes.
As we go. And now we are on the agenda item number 7, which is SHIP 2024. Staff will update the committee on the latest steps for the SHIP 2024 process, and Andy will be presenting to us.
Thank you. I don't have any formal presentation, so I'll talk this through. So at the joint meeting back in March, a TTCC working group was established or voted and was approved by the TTCC and TTC at the time. And so an invitation was sent out, I believe about early last week or last week or early this week, scheduling a meeting for next Monday. That is April 17th at 11 a.m. That meeting is going to be at Kipta in this Burke room or on Zoom, just like this meeting here is today. And at that working group meeting, we will iron out that working group, by the way, for those that are wondering, was if you didn't get the invitation, it should have been just for the Kentucky TTCC membership. The KYTC shift process, for those that don't know, is a Kentucky process that informs and is a building block to the highway plan that will be developed and approved by the legislature about this time next year, let's say. So again, next Monday, 11 o'clock. What we're going to do then is something we're going to have to do a little bit differently than we have in the past. KYTC staff, District 5 staff, are finalizing their sponsorship list. What they do, for those that weren't around a couple of years ago, KYTC gets a number of sponsorships. I think District 5 gets 65 sponsorships, 60-something sponsorships for their 8-county region. Okay. You know, a good chunk of those presumably will be in the MPO region of Jefferson, Bullitt, and Oldham counties. Okay, so they get 65. Kipta MPO gets 49 additional sponsorships. Okay, so what is a sponsorship? Sponsorship basically gets those projects, let's say nearly 100 of them, into the mix for the scoring system that is the guts of the black box or whatever you want to call it for SHIP. So it's kind of a very first cut, very preliminary cut. So the universe of projects gets whittled down a little bit through the sponsorship process. Okay, again, we have 49 to go around. So next Monday, we basically need to have a plan of attack for what we want to do with those 49 at the end of that meeting. Okay, we probably will not at that time have KYTC's finalized list. We will have some useful information for the process, and we'll have a rough idea of what we're going to need to do. So I think the way we'll end up doing that is we'll probably need to assume a few extra sponsorships. Okay, so we might want to go a little bit heavier than we were before, because most assuredly we will assume that KYTC will sponsor some of those projects. There's no reason in the process to sponsor the same projects, okay? Later this summer, that working group will meet again for the boost component of the process. Then it's pretty important that we both do boost the same project, okay? So it's kind of a difference there. There's no reason to sponsor the same projects. Once you're in, but the boosting, that tighter, that deeper cut, might want to partner up, and I think they called it turbo boost in the past. That is KYTC and the ads and NPOs boosting the same projects. We will need to have this approved at the TPC meeting on April 27th. So unfortunately, it's going to be a tight timeline because it's required for those sponsorships to be finalized by the end of the month or by the 28th, if I'm not mistaken. So the clock's ticking on that. So we've got to act regardless. Okay. So Tom, did I miss anything, or is there anything you want to add? Okay. Okay. So I apologize. We'll have an instructive meeting. We'll hammer it out. I think last time, again, I think we had the same number of booths last time, 49. There were plenty to go around. I think I want to ease some minds there. There's plenty of booths to go around. There were last time. We'll say that. Last time we may have done like 10, 10, and 29. 10 for Bullitt and Oldham counties, 29 for Jefferson County. We'll probably work under the same guidelines. And again, what will happen after that meeting on Monday is we'll probably get KYTC's final boost late next week, something like that. And then we'll say, okay, that one's already boosted, next one on the list. Okay. All right. So I think that would be the best way to go about this. And again, there should be plenty to go around. All the SHIP process does is inform the next highway plan. It's only 6 years worth of projects. It's not 27 years worth of projects like a KIPTA MPO long range plan is. So again, I appreciate everybody's attendance. I think we've gotten a lot of acceptances of the meeting. Correct me if I'm wrong, Greg. It sounds like a lot of y'all will be there. We're looking forward to it. We'll see you here. We'll see you online. We'll see you when we see you. And I think I'll be happy answering questions, but otherwise we'll see you on Monday.
Thank you. That was great presentation.
Well, thank you.
The ones without slides are always special. Thanks.
They're
for
quick
the
at least.
update. And with 6 years plan, I am sure we will see some of those projects built.
That's the idea.
With the process. Any discussion, any questions for Andy? Well, hearing done, thank you. Item number 8 is really important, and this is call for planning studies. And planning,
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, planning studies funding will be available soon, and Andy will provide more information on that topic.
Yeah, I probably should have done a presentation, given what you just said. But I have one, all 3 or 4 slides, that is. So this is a lot like what you probably heard me speak about this time last year. We're heading into the new fiscal year here at KIPTA. And as you might recall, we had our work program. The draft was approved last month. The final draft will be, in February. The final draft will be in later this month. So in that work program, that irons out where we spend these dollars called PL funds. Okay, Metropolitan Planning Funds. Those are the dollars that MPOs get across the country, population-based, formula-based. Okay. The formulas are a little different in each state, so it's not necessarily X cents per capita or something like that, but it's pretty close to that. It might as well be that. And so, real importantly, is we get a good chunk of these funds from both states. We get 1.3 million and change from Kentucky and 300-something thousand in Indiana. That's what we're scheduled to get next in this upcoming fiscal year. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that's the exact same amount we're getting in Kentucky this year, and a modest increase in Indiana. What do we do with these planning funds? Not planning studies, but planning funds. They help us keep the lights on here at the MPO. That's how that's how we pay the bills here as an MPO, and MPOs across the country do the same. They can also be used to conduct transportation planning studies. More on that in just a second. There's a similar funding source called FTA Section 5303. If you ever heard us talking about that, that's basically the FTA, or Federal Transit Administration's counterpart to these funds. Okay, urban areas get 5303 funds on a per capita basis, kind of like the FHWA funds come to the urbanized areas as well. So it's technically, when I say PL funds in this presentation and for the conversation here this afternoon, it's technically a combination of PL funds and the Section 5303 funds. Really importantly, we've gotten more of these funds than we used to. We've gotten big jumps in the PL funds, those are the FHWA funds again, in both states. In Indiana, we got a sizable increase, at least on a percentage basis, on the 5303 funds with the new infrastructure law. And in Kentucky, we actually get the same amount as we used to for the time being, at least. These funds do require an 80-20 local match, and I put an asterisk there because KYTC actually matches 5% of the 20, or however you want to say that. 25% of the match is handled by KYTC in Kentucky. And so the other half, or the other 15% of the 20% is covered typically by the local dues that agencies around this region pay into KIPTA. Okay, so that's kind of the basis for what PL funds are, in case you were wondering. What we've done in the past, and what we did a lot of last year because of this influx with the new infrastructure law, is something that we're going to be in the place where we should do again. That is to pass along some of these planning studies to eligible agencies around our region to do planning studies in the upcoming fiscal year. Okay, so last year, those funds went to Clarksville, to Louisville Metro, and to a study in Oldham County. Next slide, please. So here's kind of nuts and bolts. I think I borrowed this from last year's presentation with one key change, or a couple key changes. What's eligible? You can do these planning studies, you can do data collection, but what you can't do is you probably can't build anything with it, right? It's the preliminary version of what you ultimately build. It's a planning study to look at a corridor, a planning study to look at, I don't know, an example, not necessarily these funds, but of similar funds like park micro mobility study, a study of a planning study that doesn't implement, it's not operations money, okay? It's not right away, it's not utilities, it's not construction, as it says on the screen. It looks like this year we'll probably have about $250,000 federal available. Okay, last year was 225. This year, what's in the UP draft UPWP, that's our work program again, is 250,000 federal. Okay, that could be a little bit more. I don't think it's likely to be less, but it could be a little bit more. Could be a little bit more because there's going to be some carryover money from Indiana, so we might have a little bit more than that. So that's a good round number, and we'll start there. Okay, see where it ends. Okay, that third thing, what's the time frame? That's real important. It's important that these funds get spent next fiscal year by the end of the fiscal year. So I'm not going to say they absolutely cannot be carried over, but they should not be assumed to be able to be carried over. It should be something that can get wrapped up in the fiscal year. Okay, that's important for y'all's decision making. How to apply? You're going to apply the same way you did before. That is, when you apply for projects, you go to our forms page, and there will be on our transportation planning portal. It should be pretty easy. It's not out there yet. It'll say coming soon. We'll have that up shortly. But what you're going to need to do, it's pretty easy to apply and give us a justification. It's pretty straightforward. So we are asking for those by late May. Okay, sooner the better. But right now we've got a May 26th deadline on there. Okay, it's important. While I'd like to give more time, if not quite a bit more time, it's important that we get these under contract, if not before the new fiscal year, as soon as we can within the new fiscal year. So because remember we got that June 30th, 2024 deadline on the other end, so we can't wait too long. Okay, all right. Next slide, please. Again, on that application, you'll see some of this stuff. Here's the stuff that you need to fill out, scoring criteria, that sort of thing. Last year, we ended up with enough money to go around. I mentioned earlier that it'd be an 80-20 split. I think last year, all three projects ended up being overmatched. Okay, so Louisville Metro said, I think it was a 50-50 split, if I'm not mistaken. So for every dollar they got federal, they matched with one of their own. I think in order to fund the two other projects we ended up doing, it needed to be more than 20. It was like 28% or 29%. So we'll see what we get, but a project that can overmatch, that's going to, frankly, that might be that will have a competitive advantage in some ways. I'm not asking, we're not going to the highest bidder here. But I'm saying that there's not infinite dollars to go around all at the same time, okay? And we may end up asking, hey, could you handle 30% so that we can fund all the 2 or all 3 or all 4 of these projects? I mean, to be clear, this could go to 1 project, this could go to 5 projects. I don't know if you do more than 5, it'd be small projects, but it is an opportunity that we have. It's fortunate and unfortunate all at the same time. It's fortunate that we can pass along this money. So hopefully some planning studies that are some unmet needs can get done. I don't think I have any more slides. That's the last one. That's all I have. Be happy to answer any questions. I'll have more information at the TPC meeting here in a couple of weeks. But I wanted to put that out there in front of the TTCC so you can be thinking about that and or discussing that with elected leadership or otherwise in your own jurisdictions. And if you have any questions or ideas, feel free to reach out to me or staff here at KIPTA, and we can say, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, or that's an eligible project. And we'll go from there.
Thank you, Andy. Good information, good to have planning funding, even if it's not operational. We can't really ever deliver good projects without good plans. So good plans and studies are foundation for projects delivery. So I really being a planner in transportation, I really appreciate that category, and I'm sure we all can use it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional comments, questions? Okay, moving forward, item number 9, amendment 1 to Connecting Kentuckiana 2050 MPP and fiscal year 23 to 26 transportation improvement plan. And staff will present the schedule for amendment 1. With that, handing over to Chris.
Okay, thank you very much. So this is a much shorter presentation. We still have the MTP and the TIP pending approval, but we have got to get started with figuring out our schedule for amendment 1 because we have a few projects already on deck. Most of you know this information, the changes to the fiscal year 2023 to 2026 to administrative modification guidelines are designed to process minor changes more quickly. However, amendments are typically used for major changes and take a lot longer to process sometimes because there's more steps involved. They can sometimes take up to 6 months. This is because the changes considered regionally significant must be presented to the public and include an opportunity for the public comments. The changes must also be presented formally and approved by the TPC. Any project that affects air quality, which is the non-exempt projects, those must be analyzed further to ensure conformity with the national air quality standards set by the EPA. The amendments are used for adding and removing federally funded projects or project phases that are ineligible for the administrative modifications. The projects with changes in the design concept or scope of the project have to go for amendments, and project cost changes that trigger new fiscal constraint determination or project changes that affect the air quality conformity determination are all under the need of being updated through an amendment as opposed to an admin mod. So here is our draft schedule for our first amendment. Project applications, they're going to be due by May 3rd tentatively, but we already have a few. If any of you have other projects that you're thinking are going to need to go for an amendment, the sooner the better. We'd like to have those all in by May 3rd. And then after that, we're going to take some time, KIPTA staff, to do a project review. Then, and this takes a little while, the air quality conformity activities, we've got about 5 weeks, I think, scheduled for that, May 15th to June 22nd. And then we have our 15-day public comment period for June 23rd to July 8th. Then July 11th, I think this is probably a Monday, that's when we'll send the comments to the TPC. July 12th, we'll have the TTCC recommendation, hopefully. And the TPC action is set for July 27th. Then the longer part of the process is the federal review. It's a 30-day review. And hopefully by August 27th, the process will be complete. And if anyone has any questions that they want to ask about
So,
the timeline.
so we already know that there's one, if not multiple projects that will need to be one of those non-exempt projects that Chris was mentioning earlier, or non-exempt change, I guess, more specifically. And so it will be the longer amendment process, not the shorter one. But then again, if we were to move it up 1 month to late June, that might get a little weird, and why it might get a little weird is the following: we may not have approval of we might not have a thing to amend at that time, meaning we might not have that federal approval for our new long-range plan tip until around that time, right? It's going to be adopted or scheduled to be adopted at May TPC. Our federal partners have 60 days to go ahead and act on that, so it could be into July. So this is probably about as quick as we can do, and I think it is pretty quick. It is a quick schedule, I suppose, for a non-exempt amendment. But we know that it will need to be a non-exempt amendment. It's not like if we didn't know that, we would maybe have some question or an asterisk there on the air quality conformity activities, and that takes about as much time as anything else. So unless that project doesn't need to be in there, or those projects don't need to be in there, but all signs point to them needing to be in there as soon as possible. This will probably be our schedule here. Hopefully we'll have something to amend on July 27th. Yes,
yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, thank you for that clarification. What worries me here is that May 3rd date is approaching very fast, where applications new or modified are due. So would you please send a reminder to everybody in time that we update those projects?
Yes, of
I
course.
mean, yeah, it's important to meet your deadlines.
Yeah,
for
hopefully.
us.
Yeah, part of what we are thinking, by the way, just for full disclosure, is that while there are projects that need to be in part of amendment, we wouldn't be having a schedule if there weren't. We do know that. Hopefully the number of projects is not a giant number, given the recent call for projects we did last year, that the new MTP and the new TIP are big time change, and amendments are as needed. And so, of course, we will have another one before the end of the year. There's no doubt about that. We always have them periodically. And so, this is to get those in there that have been waiting very, very patiently, through this update process. In other words, they might have just missed their inclusion in the update. So they've been waiting very patiently for this opportunity.
Sounds good. Thank you to both of you. So item number 10 is connecting Kentuckiana 2050 MTP and also 2023 to 26 TIP improvements program outreach update. And Greg will share more information with us.
Yes, I don't have anything formal, but I do want to show off our landing page that we have created for the public comment opportunity that's ongoing right now until April 22nd for the new TIP and the new MTP. This page can actually be gotten, you get to it from our main site. It's on TIPTA.org, on our slide deck, as well as our transportation page and our public participation page. This allows the public the opportunity to review the documents. As you can see, we have the MTP as well as the TIP up there, the documents themselves, as well as ability to leave general comments. That's going to take you to a form stack for either one, for the MTP or the TIP. We also have created project-specific interactive maps, so people can go onto this. And we have broken down the projects into the blue is bike and pedestrian projects, the reds are roadway projects. What people can do is they click right here on the little icon that allows them to leave a drag and drop on the map where they want to leave their project specific comments. Some people have so far commented, as you can see, but it's just a good way to do that as well. We pushed out as well So we pushed out press release to all the media and just informing them of this as well. And then we've got our public meetings. We had our first one yesterday. That went from noon to 1. I think we had about a half a dozen people in there. We have one scheduled for tomorrow evening from 5 to 6 as well. We've sent it out to all of the city council members to release in their newsletters. And we have hard copies at KYTC as well as our offices here. We're doing our paid social media advertising and our organic advertising on social media as well. We've also done flyers to all the NPO libraries, some of the business associations, St. Matthews and J-Town and Middletown Chamber of Commerce's as well. Also have been putting them out in their newsletter. So one thing I will show that is it kind of interesting. We don't have any Indiana comments yet. We've got a lot of comments over here in Kentucky on the side of the river, but over in Indiana that for either the MTP or that we haven't gotten any.
Must be perfect then.
I guess so, yeah. So I will encourage our Indiana folks on the call as well as in the room, share those if you can to get those out. Hopefully get some comments here in the next couple of weeks. Like I said, we do a public meeting tomorrow from 5 to 6. Information is on that landing page that I just showed you. So take any questions anybody's got any, but as I said, nothing formal today other than we're just wrapping that up in the next couple of weeks.
Well, that's great. Thank you. And a very good interactive approach virtually. And obviously, we all are trying to reach out to the community and collect the comments the best we can under circumstances before the COVID, during COVID today, and public participation in itself is a science and how we reach out to the population to get their input. And from my perspective, being a transit user and planner and somebody who also struggled with reaching out to the community, collecting comments and making sure we address the community needs. I always think about low income and minority population, and if our processes really address their needs, do we give enough opportunities to people from all walks of life to participate in our processes and how we can help them? This is just a thought to share with everybody. And while our technology is great and TARP also goes out and holds public meetings and some are visited, some not, we have a virtual meeting today on our proposed service changes. It's always unknown. You can never be prepared enough. But in my mind, always the parts of the community that really do need services is how we reach out to them, how we get their input. Again, just a thought for all of us who are trying to collect public input. You are doing great, and I know your processes are well established. Keep doing what you do. Thanks. Any other discussion or comments for Greg? Okay, hearing done, thank you. The next item is other business. Do we have any other business, Andy and Greg or Kita team or anyone else?
Just real quick, if it's okay, the quick updates on a couple of things. Our Safe Streets and Roads for All grant, that is well underway. We hope to get back with everybody probably within the next month or so. Probably have an update probably in what month are we in? April, probably in May on that one. We'll probably get that underway probably in May or June. The corridor ID, the railroad one I mentioned earlier, corridor ID and development program, that we'll probably hear something yet up or down on if we got the grant sometime around the summer is what we are expecting. Okay, so no major updates there. Thank you for those that participated in the quarterly meeting in Indiana recently and the twice a year meeting in Kentucky to get some of our dedicated funding questions, issues handled. Hopefully, fingers crossed, there's some awardable projects over there in southern Indiana. I think that's coming up this week or next, if I'm not mistaken, the deadline for some of those. And I think that's about all I have right now.
Well, those are all good information, exciting to learn about this grant. I think we all have high hopes to talk about rail and maybe do some preliminary assessment. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And the last item is adjourn the meeting. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Adjourn.
Okay, do we have a second?
There we go.
Thank you. I don't think there is discussion, right? With that, motion carries. The meeting is adjourned.